Star Fox Assault is a game I've had on my backlog for many years at this point. Ever since I played Star Fox 64 3D when I was little, I was always looking forward for the next game to give me that same addicting arcade-like experience. The more I dove into the franchise, however, the more I realized that an improvement to that 64 formula was not going to be coming. At least, not from the series itself. The original Star Fox on SNES was an impressive feat for its time for sure, but everything that made that game good was done better by Star Fox 64. Command and Zero are both lifeless tech demos that were brought out like show ponies for Nintendo's shitty hardware gimmicks. And Adventures is a complete failure on account of the fact that it's not only a terrible Star Fox game, but it's also a terrible imitation of the 3D Zelda formula. A bad look when you're dealing with one of Nintendo's oldest and most beloved franchises. That left Assault as the only game other than 64 and the other two SNES games that had any sort of consistent quality. That may be in part due to the constant change in developers for each installment. Despite the fact that several major studios have tried their hands at Star Fox, it seems that Bandai Namco is the only one that saw much of success. Assault is still the second best received game among fans in the series since it came out back in 2005. Even beating Nintendo's sorry excuse for innovation in 2016. I'll say up front that I still think 64 is the better game. However, Star Fox Assault is still a game that I enjoy very much, and now I'd like to tell you why. If you happen to catch my crucially influential Sonic Forces review last year, you'll know that I put a lot of value into the story of a game when it's meant to be a selling point. I do believe that to be the case with Star Fox Assault, and I'm happy to say it's the most interesting and character-driven story in the franchise. The game starts out with the crew teaming up with the Cornerian army to wipe out the last remnants of Andross's forces, led by his nephew Oinkany. After mopping the floor with him, new threats arrive on the scene, later identified as the Aporoids, a parasitic alien race that can corrupt both people and machines. Through this, they plan to assimilate all living things into Aporoids and spread their race farther into the galaxy. Star Fox suits up to stop them by any means necessary, having to make tough decisions on close friends throughout the journey, and even getting some unlikely assistance from rival team Star Wolf against a much greater common enemy. In the end, with the assistance of Star Wolf and the Cornerian army, Star Fox puts an end to the Aporoid invasion and saves the Lylat system. When you boil it down like I just did, it's definitely not one of the deepest stories you'll see out there. But to be honest, I really don't think it needs to be. There's definitely a few more twists and recurring plot threads that flesh out the story to make things a little more compelling, and for what it is, I actually think it's quite solid. All of that can be owed to where the game's story really shines, and that is with its stellar character interactions. Each member of the team once again has their own distinct personality, and they all bounce off each other very well. One of my favorite examples of this is when your team members comment on how often Slippy gets himself into trouble. This game knows how annoying Slippy was in Star Fox 64, and throughout the game the team members trade playful jabs at his expense. All of this culminating in one of my favorite one-liners in the entire series at the beginning of Mission 6, where this exchange plays out.
Falco, Slippy, the airborne enemies are all yours. Gotcha. Try not to make a mess of things, Slippy.
You're a rasp, Falco. Seriously. Shut your beak for once.
They've been laughing since I can remember, but they're not gonna laugh anymore.
Yeah, even Slippy's had enough of everyone's shit, and who can blame him? Interactions like this are littered throughout the game, and it's what makes this dialogue a level deeper than it was back in Star Fox 64. From Panther desperately trying to score a date.
You wanna ride on my wing, Crystal?
As long as I'm covering Fox.
Oh, okay, fine.
To the Fox and Wolf team-ups. This game has a lot of character to it that no other game in the series really has, and I think it's very charming. Another layer to that charm has to be the voice acting itself. On a professional level, yeah, it's technically a step up from Star Fox 64 as well as Star Fox Adventures. But with the dry as hell delivery of some of these characters, especially from Fox, a whole lot of the emotional weight of some of these lines goes directly into belly laughs at these performances. And to be fair, these voice actors were not given the best script possible, because some of these lines are just hokey as shit, man.
Our final line of defense has been penetrated.
Is this guy some kind of demon? Ah! I'll handle him!
What? Are you?
The program's working!
Hey, team.
Destruction is spreading across the entire planet.
So, I guess that's the end of the Aperoids.
So the whole thing was just one big entity. She tried to bypass evolution by stealing souls, but you have to be born with one.
Hey champ, that's really interesting. Next time, keep it to yourself.
Many of these lines definitely have the same energy as some of Sonic Adventure's cutscenes, and you know what? I absolutely love it. It's got this early 2000s crappiness to it that just gives the game a different kind of charm, kind of a relic of its own past kind of deal, and I just find it very endearing. While we're talking about how the story is brought to life on screen, I figure it's a good time to go ahead and talk about the game's presentation as a whole. The first thing that hits you when you boot up the game is its stellar soundtrack. The score is fully orchestrated and is an absolute joy to listen to. Each song in this game is brewing with a bombastic attitude that would be right at home as background music to a Star Wars space battle. A handful of these songs are orchestrated remixes of Star Fox 64 songs, and hearing some of these classics played with real instruments gives me quite the nostalgia boner. If I had to describe the soundtrack in one sentence, it would be this. Assault soundtrack is what you remember 64's OST sounding like, which is about the highest compliment I could give to this game's score. Okay, confession time. The footage you're seeing of this game for me wasn't recorded on an original GameCube. I played the game on Dolphin emulator with a 16:9 widescreen hack while rendering the game at 1080p. I just wanted to give full disclosure as to why the game looks crisper than you might remember it being on original hardware. If you're someone who gets pissy with folks playing old school games outside of their original aspect ratio, then you can take that massive cock in your hand and leave an angry comment about how I'm not presenting the game as originally intended. Apologies for wanting the game to look pretty on video. Now that that's out of the way, I'd like to talk about just how pretty this game actually is. Each of the 10 levels stand out from each other excellently, all having different moods and coloring motifs. The Aperoid homeworld, opening level, and Sorry are some of my personal favorites. Though really, like I said before, each one stands out on its own and is beautiful in its own way. It's definitely some of the better art direction I've seen on the GameCube. Anyways, that is about all I have to say on the game's presentation. It's such a visually impressive game for the hardware that I'd be willing to stack it up against some of the prettiest games on the GameCube. Not to mention its stellar soundtrack is far and away the best the Star Fox series has to offer. Which is nice and all, but this is a video game after all. So, how does it play? Star Fox Assault's gameplay can be broken down into two main play styles, the R-Wing and the on-foot missions. The R-Wing sections of the game are just as good and as fun as they were back in Star Fox 64, with a mix of all-range and on-rails stages and sections. I really would go so far as to say that these levels stack up with some of Star Fox 64's best, with their silky smooth controls and crunchy sound design that add to that classic arcade shoot-'em-up style that I love so much. Unfortunately, the R-Wing sections in this game are only about half of the gameplay. The rest of the game is actually spent on foot with Fox himself, both in and out of the Landmaster. I'll start off with the element of these sections that is universally criticized, and that has to be the controls. If you thought the Landmaster was the only tank you were going to control in this game, then think again, because Fox controls with the graceful precision of a John Deere tractor. This is partly mitigated by using the dual-stick alternate control scheme, which is what I ended up using. With this, you can actually turn while walking without having to awkwardly stop in place. It's still not as fluid as I'd like it to be, but it's sure a hell of a lot better than the other two options. Option A is basically a Metroid Prime button layout, but with tank controls, so it's worse. And whatever this curse shit is for Option C, I still don't understand why anybody would pick that one. In terms of level design though, I do think that's where the fun in this gameplay style can really show. On foot, you have all these different types of guns to use, ranging from rocket launchers to the amazing Gatling gun. I personally stuck to the normal blaster and machine gun for the most part. I just felt that they got the job done most of the time, with the machine gun being able to mow down all the super small enemies. Normally, I had enough patience to just use the blaster and its fully charged up charge shot to take care of any big enemies that I really had to worry about. Every gun has a bit of an auto lock on to it as well, to just help you aim a little bit. Though I guess I would have preferred having a separate lock-on button for reliability's sake, because it can be picky with distance, in the vein that, again, Metroid Prime had a lock-on button that worked really well. Swapping from Solo Fox to the Landmaster also feels extremely natural, especially considering that the Landmaster helps you do certain on-foot tasks faster and more efficiently. Well, naturally, because it's a tank. But you get the point. I think the level where all the elements begin to really shine and meld as one is in Mission 6, the Saria mission. You have to take out 8 enemy spawners or hatchers around the ruins on foot while having to periodically get into the R-Wing to clear out the skies. The constant reminder that enemies are building up in the skies while having to frantically find hatchers on foot and claustrophobic hallways and rooms shows the potential this playstyle has. It puts up a good challenge while also building proper tension and stress. And you know what? It's actually pretty fun. I wish more of the on-foot segments were like this one level. Despite it not having a boss, it's one of my favorite levels in the whole game. I'd love to see a game where this style is much more refined and varied. On that variance note though, the on-foot segments don't really have any. Almost every single time you are asked to kill these enemy spawners or hatchers, which, I'll be frank, isn't the most interesting after the third time you've done it. They're fine, and if we were to see this playstyle return once again, I'd be fine with having them for maybe a level or two, but gosh, I really wish there was more variety. One of the only times the game strays from the hatchers on foot is Corneria, where you have to find these eyes in the sky and snipe them. I actually do like this level. It forces you to be aware of your surroundings when you scope in to snipe and hope that you either cleared out enough enemies in the area to where they won't just hit you while you're trying to snipe, or you clear out the enemies first. You always have to be thinking on your toes in this level, and it's something that I do very much like about it. The next piece of gameplay I'd like to talk about has to be the boss fights. They range from pretty boring to actually good, so I'll just talk about my 3 standouts. That being the Starwolf encounter in Chapter 4, Pigma encounter in Chapter 5, and the final boss. The Starwolf dogfight is a lot like the ones back in Star Fox 64, meaning that yes, it's still fun to chase these guys around and shoot them down. They can do loop-de-loops, they can do U-turns, just like in 64. If you played those ones and liked it, you're gonna like this one. In a similar vein, Pigma is also a very good boss fight, and this specific boss is very much like the boss in Area 6 back in Star Fox 64, where you have to clear out these tentacles on this circular boss. You need to clear out the tentacles first before getting to the weak spot in the middle. And it's interesting. It keeps you engaged. It keeps you on your toes. It's fun. And in a similar vein, the final boss is thankfully probably the best boss in the game. Not the first segment though. The first of the 3 phases is just simply not that great. All you really have to do is avoid the little small fry enemies that the Emperor Queen will throw at you, and just wail on her, I don't know what you call it, the shell, and just attack the big ruby part on the stomach, and it's pretty easy. You don't really have to think too hard on it. The second and third phases, though, are definitely where it shines. The use of specific weak points, once again, really shines here, while trying to avoid all these crazy lasers and enemies that the Queen is throwing at you, while she'll kind of lash out at you with her head. You also have to knock off a kind of helmet shell thing off her head. before you can actually start doing damage to her, so just another layer to the boss fight. It keeps you on your toes. It's kind of like the Pigma boss fight, but faster. So it was a really good boss. I'd stack that boss up there with a lot of the best bosses in Star Fox 64. It even ends on a callback to the original SNES game, where the final phase is a rectangle desperately trying to run away from you as you wail on it to finish the game. The final note on the gameplay here will be my, well, non-note on its multiplayer. I've heard it's a great multiplayer, and if it's anything like Star Fox 64 3D's multiplayer, I'd wholeheartedly agree with the sentiment that it is great. It is just that I did not get to it for this review. If you still play local multiplayer, maybe with your sibling or your cousins or something, who knows, it's probably really good in the same way Sonic Adventure 2 Battles multiplayer was very good. It looks like fun. That's the best way I can put it. I just figured I should mention it before someone's childhood got attacked by the cardinal sin that I didn't play the multiplayer. There are a few other moments in the game that I didn't go into much detail on, like how Ficina is definitely the worst level in the game, with the dullest mission and the worst boss, or how Orbital Gate thought that just having a bunch of missiles to shoot down for the boss counted as a boss. But for the most part, that's about the extent of my thoughts on the gameplay. It's solid from beginning to end, and I really do believe the on-foot stuff has untapped potential to be an amazing complement to the traditional on-rail space shooter gameplay. That hope never exactly came to fruition, unfortunately. After the wet fart that was Star Fox Command and the equally creamy Star Fox Zero, the series has been silent since 2016. Both games were underwhelming showcases of Nintendo's gimmick-driven hardware, and from the way Shigeru Miyamoto talks about this franchise, it's unlikely that we'll see the series again in a serious production anytime soon. That leaves Assault in almost the last of its kind in a certain sense. It may not have been a complete return to form for the series, but it showed a willingness to push the series forward in a new and interesting way that, if refined, I really do believe could be something truly remarkable. Here's hoping that Nintendo decides to give a half shit about the series again, and maybe give a shelter to this endangered old fox.